Behind every bit of mom wisdom is a story of a real mom and real kids just trying to love each other well. Whether you're cozied up on the couch with a mug of coffee or out for a walk, you're welcome to join us as we share stories and laugh, learn, and grow together. It's the iMom Podcast. Welcome to this week's episode of the iMom Podcast. I'm Abby. Susan, Chloe, and Megan are with me again this week, and we're so glad that you're here. I think we've all said to ourselves or heard parents say, when I was a kid, and then there's some fact about like what you did. I mean, the old one is walk uphill both ways in the snow, but then we all walked to friends' houses. We rode our bikes to the store. We hung out at the mall alone. Like mom would drop us off and not come back for a few hours. And so in today's episode, we're going to talk about the importance of helping our kids become more independent, whether they're 5 months old or 15 years old, and how to give them freedom to grow, even when it is difficult for us as moms, because it is hard. So what are some ways, you guys, that we're seeing less independence being given to our kids than maybe it was being done, 10 years ago, 30 years ago, or more?
How about 80 years ago? Not that I'm that old, but it always blows my mind. Mark's dad used to tell the story. His dad died when he was really young, and it was just he and his sister and his mother. And he tells the story of how he went to work in the Jolly Green Giant factory at 12.
Gosh, maybe that's what killed him.
No, he didn't die till he was in his 90. Oh. But I'm just saying, we like, he was only 12.
My math is off.
He couldn't have been Mark's dad if he died at 12.
That's a good point. That's a good point. My math was bad. Well, I don't know, 12. I mean, people were making babies earlier then.
No, somebody did just tell me a girl had yeah.
Okay. Anyways.
Mark's dad, his dad died when he was really young, and he had to go to work at the age of 12 in the Jolly Green Giant factory. I can't believe you could get a job there at 12.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Did he walk with his lunchbox? And
I guess. No, he went to school. He went after school. So he went to school and went to work after school. And then he tells the story of how he worked for the railroad company in the summers, laying down track to pay for college. Oh he had a football scholarship, and then he got injured and lost it. And then he had to go to pay railroad track. Yeah. In 1890.
Wow.
That's crazy.
Wow. Half of the kids who are 18 now aren't allowed to cross the railroad tracks.
So
true. I was just talking to a friend the other day who was saying that she doesn't want her son to ride his bike around the neighborhood without a phone. Like she feels nervous. They live in a fairly big neighborhood, but he doesn't have a phone. And so she's like, I have to give him mine. But then if I'm working, I need my phone nearby. And she's like, I don't know what I'm going to do for
Who's
the summer.
Who's he going to call anyway if he's got her phone?
He would call her on his iPad. Like his iPad has a number hooked up to it. And so he can call her or whatever. But she's like, I'm happy having the neighborhood kids come over to my house and play in my yard. But I'm nervous about having my son ride his bike around. And I don't know. I get it.
Wouldn't she be, I don't know, maybe be nervous about what if he was on his phone while riding the bike?
And then texting
danger,
and writing?
Danger.
Yeah, true.
Yes, I think we are seeing less independence. I know some people that really have never left their kids, not for a date night, not for a trip, for nothing. They really never left their children. And I think at some point you have to invest in your marriage or in yourself and leave them so they get used to you being gone for a short period of time. It's very normal. And so I sometimes am kind of concerned when I hear that people have never, ever left their kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Megan, I'm seeing a lot of that on social just because and I'm sorry, this is a hot take, but I feel like there's this little bit of a tendency in my generation of mothers that almost doesn't, we don't want our kids to be independent. We want our kids to need us. And we're afraid of them, getting to this place where they can do things on their own because I don't know if it's because we're afraid of becoming
obsolete.
Yeah.
You guys just need to have more kids because if you get to 5, trust me,
there's no
you
option.
need to do this yourself.
There's no options.
Yeah. I felt like a bad mom because I left both my kids when they were 5 months old to go on a trip. But I'm such an extrovert that I felt like I had been on house arrest for those first few months. And so I really mentally needed to get out and go do something and kind of have a little bit of space just to have fun with my husband and by myself with no kids. But I did kind of feel bad. People would be like, I can't believe you're leaving your baby. They're so little. And I was like, sorry.
Now, I will say,
I'm going to leave them at some point.
For the mom who does not have somebody to leave their kids with, that's not an option.
Yeah.
You're fortunate that you've got grandparents on both sides who are willing to babysit.
You know, on that note, Megan, you left them because that was something that you needed, like for your mental health. What do you say then to the mom who would say, for my mental health, I don't want to leave my kids, you know?
And let me say, I'm not advocating for leaving your child at 5 months. It's very young. I sometimes waffle if I would do that again. But I think at some point, you have to leave their kids. You have to decide on what age you think is appropriate. But I definitely think a date night out before they're 1 is necessary.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
And I do think the point here of what we're talking about is, do kids have less independence than they used to? If the motivation as a mom is, I can't leave my kids because they need me and nobody else can fill my role, well, that's where you're kind of turning it upside down. Well, why do they need you so much? How old are they? And can they really rely on somebody else?
But that's kind of what I'm talking about with this like social media stuff, because like I feel this on a very deep level, because I've had people say to me, my child is in daycare, and I've had people say to me, are you okay with putting him in daycare all day? He misses you. Like, no, he doesn't. He really doesn't. He doesn't know I'm not there. The other day, I was like, I went to go pick him up. James. He's just banging a block on the ground. Doesn't even know. Finally, James looks at me. Oh yeah, he's so excited. He's fine. And I think I get tired of the because I feel like I've had shame for needing independence from my child and all that too. So I think we fall in these two camps sometimes. Mm-hmm. And either way, it's I don't know. We can go so extreme on either side, I guess what I'm trying to say.
And I don't know any parent. I mean, I know, Chloe, you said that you see this trend on social media where moms are wanting their kids to need them. I don't know if you asked a mom, do you want your child to be independent? Most of them would not say no. Yes. We would all say we want our kids to be independent, but then we go and do things that don't support that. And there was a study done at the University of Michigan. They asked parents of kids age 5 through 8 and then parents of kids age 9 through 11. The one group, 74% said they make it a priority to have their child do things themselves when possible. The 9 to 11-year-old parents said 84% said that. But then when they asked them again, well, do you let them do blank? They'd be like, no. So the 5 to 8-year-old parents, only 20% let them speak for themselves to an adult. And the parents of the 9 to 11-year-old, only 33% of those parents let their child walk or bike to a friend's house. So the numbers are not matching up. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to be really radical here. So we won't let our kids ride their bike to a friend's house, but we will let them choose their gender. What is independence to me? Because sometimes I feel like culturally, we kind of lose sight on what is age appropriate independence. If we're so worried about their safety, they can't ride their bike, but they can choose to be medically treated to change their gender. Do you get what I'm saying?
Or even have a phone. And have access to social media and have access to pornography and all these things at such a young age. That's so unsafe.
So I feel we have culture. There's too much culture playing into, I need to make their bed and their breakfast, but they can be on social media. How are they wise enough for that, but they're not wise enough to make their own bed?
I think part of that comes from how the mom perceives how she thinks she'll be judged for this. So if she is in a group or if her people who are seeing her and judging her would think that she was reckless for letting her child ride 2 miles to a friend's house, then she would say no. If she's in this group and those people think that she are going to be supportive of her for supporting her child to make these life-changing decisions, then she's going to say yes to that. Do you know what I'm saying? I think a lot of our decisions, and that's kind of the next question I want to ask, what gets in the way of us letting our kids be more independent. A lot of it is how we are going to be perceived for letting them make those choices.
Instead of really looking at how can I test them to see what choices they're ready to make.
Right.
To
or
be
do I,
independent.
as their mom, think they are ready to make this choice?
So do you think
Correct.
it's more of a, like we make those kinds of decisions based off of how we think will be perceived?
I think so. Like if, God forbid, if your child rides to the convenience store to buy candy and something happens,
Yeah.
how are people going to how is someone going to look at me as a mom that I let my 12-year-old ride his bike a mile away?
Wow.
Are they going to say, shame on you?
Do you guys
Don't
think,
you know the dangers that are out there today?
sorry, I'm like going down a tangent, but do you think that's because of social media? Because we're constantly like putting ourselves out there for the world to perceive. So now we're like looking at our life decisions of like, if the worst thing happens, it's all going to fall back on my reflection, my reputation.
Or is it fear because we read so much about people being
Yeah.
hurt? So, but I do feel like there's so many great technologies, like even those air tags we put
Oh
in
my
our
gosh,
suitcase.
yeah.
So, okay, baby, you can go ride. Tie this air tag on your wrist or put it in your pocket. I just want to make sure, see where you are and make sure you're safe.
Yeah.
If you go to the store and come back, I'm going to trust you to go to your friend's house and come back. You know, it's kind of like we have so many things to help us today.
That's true.
That's
well,
what,
and
go ahead.
this is something, so one of my favorite books that I've read recently is called The Anxious Generation. And the author, Jonathan Haidt, I apologize if I butchered his last name, but he talks about how our generation is so afraid of the outside world and the dangers and the risks that we have decided to shut them in the house with a tablet that poses a much greater risk than anything in the outside world would more than likely ever pose. And so his point is like, get them outside, let them explore, let them be curious, because honestly, in today's day and age, like the risk of something happening to them outside is far less than the risk that they're going to have staring at a screen and having access to the internet.
That's exactly what I told my friend when I was talking to her. From a different angle, though, I said the risk of something happening to him while he's biking around the neighborhood is slim. It could happen. Yes, it could happen, but it's slim. The guaranteed risk of him not being given any freedom or any independence to be away from you is guaranteed. Like he will not grow into the young person and then the adult that he is meant to grow into if he's not given some freedom. That is proven by research.
And let's just keep our heads straight. Here I am. I'm going to bring up another controversial example, but we won't let him ride the bike because we're afraid, something's going to happen to him. But we'll put him in pads and throw him on a football field at the same age where he's going to get knocked over, a dozen times a day. And we're okay with that. So again, I don't always really understand our irrational fears for what we advocate is okay and not okay. I think we really need to look at our children and are you ready for this?
Yeah.
Can you do it in a safe way? And let's test the waters. And then they start earning more and more independence with practice. And I think that's the thing. If we hold them back, then are they flexing that independent muscle and getting used to making wise choices and suffering minor consequences because these are little risks and learning that, oh yeah, I probably shouldn't have done that. My mom was right, but okay, it hurt. I'm not going to do it next time.
Yeah.
Versus opening the door at 16.
Yeah.
That's exactly kind of what Jonathan talks about in this book is kids have to go out and explore and take small risks and get that mental feedback like, oh, that didn't go well. Or, oh, that other child reacted poorly. Or, oh, I rode my bike too fast down that hill and get that negative mental feedback so that they take those risks in a small way so that they learn when they get older and they decide whether they're going to take these big risks. They have kind of that feedback in their brain. I'm kind of butchering it how he did it, but it's this whole cognitive risk-taking behavioral things that they have to learn, and they have to learn in small ways when they're little so that when they get older, they're not trying to do those things when they're older and really getting in trouble or getting hurt or whatever it might be.
Well, and what you're saying is experiential learning is much more valuable than a lecture.
Right. Well, no, I was reading, I haven't read the book yet, but I have it on my checkout list. But I was reading some of what he wrote, and they did a study where they interviewed students from Turkey, Russia, Canada, and the United States, and they asked them all to describe a risky or dangerous situation. And the Turkish and Russian kids described legitimately dangerous situations, like violent fights on like public transportation, or women being followed aggressively on the street. And then the American students would cite something like being alone outside as dangerous, right? And what they found was that the American students' risk threshold was low. And then when they later tried to be more independent, they saw just like regular things out at college as being more dangerous than they really were. So what they found basically was that if you grow up being told everything is too dangerous or distressing for you to handle, then that actually becomes your worldview.
Yeah. Yes. And that brings me back to my point about, I feel like sometimes I'm hearing in my generation of mothers that we are too uncomfortable as moms to see our kids suffer. Like, we chose to sleep train James, and that, I had some people say like, oh my gosh, like you're not going to want to do that. You're just going to hear him scream all night. It's going to be horrible, blah, blah, blah. And honestly, like it wasn't as bad as we thought it was going to be, because James was a horrible sleeper. He's not a great sleeper still, but he's a way better sleeper because he learned the self-soothing skills that only sleep training would have allowed him to learn. And I had to get past my discomfort of hearing him cry and trusting that like this is the right thing for him to, grow that muscle. And now he does sleep. The other night, he slept for like an 11-hour stretch. That's the longest he's ever done in his life. But it's like getting past your own discomfort of, okay, my kid's crying. Okay, my kid is uncomfortable. That doesn't mean I'm going to take him in the bed with me and let him sleep in my bed with my husband and I and not have that time with my husband because it's uncomfortable for me. It's uncomfortable for the baby. No, just get through it. It'll be better for your kid in the long run, and it'll be better for you in the long run.
I like that. So we talked about how not giving our kids independence is harmful. I want to give some tools and some ideas for how to help give our kids a little bit more room, whether they're little like Chloe's or bigger like mine. So what can we do to do better about this as moms?
Yeah. So in the Anxious Generation, the author also talks about giving kids unstructured playtime or unsupervised playtime, whatever you want to call it. And it just gives them the chance to explore, test the limits. They also get the chance to interact with kids and get that social interaction and feedback so that they can learn to build those relationships and learn to get along with other people and other kids. And he was saying, it's not something that you start at 12 years old. You have to start that when they're much younger and let them be bored. And I think that's something that I feel like my generation has a really hard time doing, is just allowing their kids to be bored, which I totally get too, because you're sick of hearing, I'm bored 20,000 times a day and them whining about it. But when I first started doing it with my oldest, I did hear that a lot initially, but then he kind of learned to entertain himself, and he'll go outside in the backyard and explore. And then he'll come back in and play with toys by himself, and he'll color, and he'll just he's learned to entertain himself. And sometimes he does get into things that he's not supposed to get into, but not so much so that it's not safe. Like I always check in on him or monitor him and make sure he's doing okay. But then also another suggestion that the book gives is to give them more time playing with other children, because again, it's that social interaction and that feedback that they get from interacting with other kids. And both these things sound like very normal, obvious suggestions, but I think I realized I was definitely an offender of it, because I think I have gotten so used to not being bored. Like I'm either working on something, or I'm doing chores, or I'm on my phone, or sometimes I'm on my phone and watching a movie at the same time. Like I can't let myself be bored, whether it's standing in line or whatever it might be. And so then I think that spilled over to not letting my kids be bored. But it is really cool to see once they learn to have that unstructured playtime. It's really cool to see their imagination come out and how creative they get. And so it's just, they were two really good reminders to me.
Yeah. I have two things. One of them I'm good at and one of them I'm really bad at. The one that I'm good at, in that University of Michigan study actually mentioned this as a way to give kids independence, is when you're in the grocery store with them, let them go and grab something from another aisle. And trust me, I have seen the videos of like the kid being snatched from the grocery store. And I think that every time, and I'm like, okay, guys, stay together. And what do you do if someone grabs you? And they're going to be fine.
Yeah.
Right. But like, let them go and grab something from another aisle for you, because that plants an I can seed in them. It's not necessarily that moment that builds them, but they just get a little like inkling of a thought of like, I can do this. And then that seed sprouts to the next opportunity to do something that requires strength. So, we're allowing our kids room to grow when we give them these little, even one aisle worth of independence. And then the one that I'm not very good at is try to not tell your child to be careful. I'm like I said, I'm not good at that. I automatically say it. But when we say be careful, a lot of times what we mean is don't do that. It scares me. And then they shy away from the play because they're afraid. And so if you're actually concerned that your child is doing something that might be dangerous, like she's going to fall on her scooter or whatever, you can say, you got this, just hold on to the handlebars, instead of issuing a warning that something bad is going to happen. And there's research that says that risky and challenging play, like jumping off of the curb or jumping out of a tree or whatever, can actually help kids learn to make decisions, to calibrate risks, and to manage their emotions. And so like, it's the benefit of just holding back from saying those two words is really big.
Yeah. So with that, like what you just shared, that it is beneficial to allow our kids to do things that scare us and make us uncomfortable. Like, what do we do as moms to soothe ourselves and, help ourselves navigate the discomfort?
You pray.
Ooh.
And you remember that your child's life is in the hands of the Almighty. And you can bubble wrap your child. It's not going to keep them from harm. And so we have to step back and remember that. And I think the other thing we have to remember, because clearly you have such a little, and we've talked a lot about little examples, is if you don't start this young, your goal is that when your child is an adult, 18, they can operate in this world successfully. And, and that means, okay, yes, all these little examples build to much bigger things. We tend to give them everything without making them realize that, oh, when you're an adult, you got to pay for that. So think about, even chores and jobs and contributing and, oh, you want a car? Okay, well, let's talk about how you're going to pay for the insurance and the gas, because I may be willing to buy you a car, but oh yeah, I'm doing that so you can help drive the other kids to activities and, build in this expectation that independence is not just, making your own bed, but starting to care for others and pay for things and live a life. And that, school is their job. Hey, people tell me all the time, well, kids aren't making good grades. Well, that's their job right now. You are paying for their life so they can go to school 40 hours a week or study whatever included in that and do well so that in the future they can support a family.
Yeah.
And so helping them to understand the logic behind what we do. School isn't just supposed to be fun.
Yeah.
I want you to have fun. That's what creates an understanding of what it means to be independent. And even from a very little age. So, whether it's learning to pack your own lunch, everything that you do as a mom should have the question of, should I be doing this or should they? Because where do I want them to end up?
That's good.
Chloe, I will say too, it gets easier when you have a second one. Like right now, I will let the two of them go in the backyard by themselves and play. And granted, our backyard is fenced in, so I know they can't get out or go anywhere. But they're only 5 and 2, and I'll let them go out there and play by themselves. I probably would have never let James as a 2-year-old go out in the backyard by himself.
But you know that if something happens with a 5-year-old, if something happens, he's going to come call you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you don't get over your fear or your control while they're little, they're not going to get that opportunity to make those little mistakes.
Yeah.
That's going to teach them in the future. And so you really gotta handle yourself first before you can teach them.
Yeah. We would love for you to chime in on this conversation on Instagram. And we'll also post in the show notes a link to the book that Megan was talking about, The Anxious Generation. Thanks for listening. Thanks for listening to the iMom podcast. iMom is the motherhood program of the nonprofit organization Family First. Along with our fatherhood program, All Pro Dad, we exist to help you love your family well. Subscribe to our daily email, the iMom Minute, by going to imom.com/subscribe and get tons of great ideas, insight, and inspiration. The iMom podcast is hosted by me, Abby Watts, along with Susan Merrill, Megan Tigner, and Chloe Blumenthal.